I would like to talk to you about how to start a startup for if you are an AI engineer, and I presume many of you here are. And before I start, I would love to connect with you on LinkedIn and Twitter. As Alexei mentioned, I do post things regularly, but most importantly, I would love to hear any feedback or questions that you have after this talk. Cool, let's get started. What do you think these companies have in common? Well, first of all, they all use AI as part of their solution. And second, they also employ some of the most amazing AI engineers in the world because they can. But it turns out that they also buy some great AI solutions. In fact, I can't tell you, just due to contractual obligation, I can't tell you exactly which ones, but I can tell you that 4 out of 5 of these have paid significant amounts for Thematic, the software that my company makes. And this is interesting because when I started Thematic, lots of people said, well, why bother? Google or Amazon or IBM already have developed NLP APIs, and it's really powerful, and they can do what your solution does. But it turns out that if you solve real customer problem, the companies will buy from you. So why should you care? Because I think you should start as well an AI startup. So what's an AI startup? Let's talk about this first. When I say AI, I mean machine learning, deep learning, natural language processing, all of this technology that we are working with. But since it's a PowerPoint presentation, I will keep using AI to refer to it. In my career, I've learned that there are 4 different types of AI startup. The first one is when AI is the core offering that's being offered. So for example, Primer or Hugging Face, some of the recent startups that are very successful in this field. The second type of AI startup where you need to use AI to solve a specific problem, but customers don't even care that AI is used to solve it. It's really about the problem and not about the technology that's used to solve it. Thematic falls into this into this category, and many other startups do. And these two first types are the ones that I will be focusing today. So when I say why you should start an AI startup, it would be for these first 2 types. There's also startups that solve an existing problem. It doesn't require AI, but they kind of add it after when they need to fundraise and they want to look better, or when they expand their offering. And these are probably the least AI startups out of the 4. And finally, the 4th type is where you basically have a group of PhD students who are joining together, working on cool stuff, and most likely they will be acquired as a team by one of the giant companies. And the reason why this happens is because it's very difficult to hire AI engineers. And it's especially harder to find a team that works well together. And AI researchers take advantage of this, most notably Geoff Hinton, when he sold his barely formed AI startup of 3 students for $40 million to Google. If you haven't read this article, it's such a fascinating story, an amazing article. I hardly encourage you to read it. So a bit of background on myself. I have, as Alexei mentioned, I have computer science PhD from Waikato University in New Zealand, which is where I'm now. I also did a master's in natural language processing, always loved using natural language processing to solve real world problems. And it really motivates me to work with this technology. So instead of staying in academia, I left after I graduated. I left and joined a startup that raised $10 million called Pingar. Unfortunately, they failed to get any traction. So I left on my maternity leave, and I was kind of cooking up, what should I do next? And to be honest, I've never even considered that I will ever start an AI startup that would compete on the global stage. This is me here on the right, wearing ugly maternity pants, pushing the pram, and I was listening to podcasts all the time. And one of these podcasts was Y Combinator podcasts. And little did I know that a few years later, my co-founder, who's also my husband, Nathan, and we were invited to apply and were accepted into Y Combinator. And we suddenly realized that what we're building can become a $1 billion startup. Well, others believed we could, and so we did as well. So, with a bit of hard work and a bit of luck. So fast forward a few years, and what we do is we use AI to analyze customer feedback that companies constantly are collecting through a variety of channels: support tickets, chats, surveys, reviews, and we help them find answers in this data. We aren't yet a $1 billion company, but I'm still proud of what we've achieved, of the types of companies we work. Earlier this year, one of the oldest companies in NLP called Clarabridge was acquired for $1 billion. So there's clearly demand for what we do. So why should you start an AI startup? Well, first of all, if an immigrant mom with 2 young kids on the other side of the world can do it, then you can do it too. Here's what motivated me. First of all, it's not money. You can earn significantly more if you work with, at one of the well-funded startups or one of those big fives. But it's about learning new skills. I realized that there are skills that I'm really good at and enjoy doing that aren't related to AI, and that was very cool. Personal growth is huge. So learning to be a leader, motivated team, learning empathy and how other people think. You just discover so much about yourself and as a person as well. But most importantly, it's about impact. And impact for me is basically seeing people use the technologies that I develop. When you're an AI engineer and you start a startup, you truly start understanding what technology is actually needed in the world and how it fills the gap and what's important. And you are in charge on making sure that it happens, which is really exciting. So you might say that if you do research at Google, you will also get impact. Absolutely, you might. For me, it was slightly different. I did a 4-month internship at Google, and I was implementing my PhD work within their code base when somebody said, hey, can you make it work in Chinese? Our Google Chinese block search is on the rise, and it could really be used as a feature in our product. It was a long time ago. Obviously, the blog search isn't a product anymore, but I was able to actually do it by using Google's amazing NLP infrastructure. Suddenly, my code could understand blog posts in languages I don't speak, including Chinese. But ultimately, this feature never saw the light. Then when I joined somebody else's startup, Pingar, they raised tens of millions of dollars. They even bought another company. They had 50 staff. But ultimately, the product got very little traction and they ran out of money. Everything that my team developed was sold to new management to start a new product from scratch. Again, I felt like I couldn't get the impact. Compare this to Thematic. Before we even built the product and barely registered the company, there were 3 customers who were paying us for the prototype, which was a single Python file plus a PowerPoint presentation. It really felt like instant impact. So if similar things motivate you, then I think you should really consider starting a startup. Why now? Well, there wasn't ever a better time. Right now you can use a pre-seed on just the idea alone. Just having amazing credential and an idea will help you. There are giant seed funds announced by all of the major VC firms. For this, you need a little bit of customer validation, some interest, but not much again, and you can raise millions. If you don't want to do it, that's totally fine as well. We didn't. We were bootstrapping in the beginning, and bootstrapping right now is even easier. So much advice out there. Lots of people are building in the open, posting as their advice as they go on Twitter and their podcasts. But the best part is the new change that COVID brought that kind of leveled the field of how people sell and buy and take meetings. You can really reach out to anybody in the world and see if you can validate your idea with them. So you can start a startup from anywhere in the world. So how do you start a startup that solves a real business problem using AI? So kind of focusing on this. There are 3 key steps in my experience. The first one, make sure you solve a real business problem. Second, learn to sell, learn to market. And 3, focus relentlessly on finding product market fit. And I'll explain each one of these in detail. The first one is probably the hardest if you're an AI engineer, because it's so easy to build cool technology, but what you really need is a hair on fire kind of situation. So Michael Seibel was our mentor, and he's also the CEO of Y Combinator, and I loved the analogy that he told us. So imagine you're in a room, and it's an empty room. There's no water, nothing, no furniture, just an empty room, and your hair is literally on fire. Suddenly you notice this brick lying on the floor. You grab it, and that's the only thing here. So you start hitting yourself on the head, trying to put out this fire. It kind of works. You still use it there, and so the type of problem that you need to find is the one where people are using bricks. It doesn't matter if you have AI or don't, but if you solve that problem with something better than a brick, they will buy from you. Second, you need to learn how to sell. And learning to sell is basically understanding. At first you might think salespeople are cringy. Why should I even consider this? I don't want to do selling. But what happened to me was that I had 2 friends who both had computer science degrees who worked in sales, so I respected them. So when I had the situation where I developed the first thing that I tried to commercialize was my PhD research, and I just felt like it wasn't going anywhere. What was happening? We had a website and a cool demo. We had inquiries. One day, even NATO has contacted us and said, we're interested in buying your technology, but ultimately nobody was buying. So when my friends told me, why don't you do a sales course? I really listened to them, and it really changed everything. Before, sales felt like magic or something cringy, but in reality, it's all about asking the right kinds of questions. So, for example, what questions do you need to ask to understand whether it's a hair on fire kind of problem? This question is, when do you need this by? If they say sometimes next year or next quarter, it's not a hair on fire problem. If they say, oh, ideally yesterday, then it is a hair on fire kind of problem. The second part is kind of leading this person down the sales funnel, or in other words, figuring out whether your solution that you develop is the right one for this problem. And again, it's all about the right kinds of questions. Once you have a demo, you realize that it's a problem we're solving. You build a demo, you show it to them. You ask, when would you like to see a proposal? Or would you like to see a proposal? And just knowing these two questions really changed everything for me. We were able to find the problem and validate that we have the right solution. The third part is audience. And this is, a lot of people overlook this. And it's really about how others will learn that your solution exists. So you can use different methods to build your audience. You can write content, talk about the problem that you're solving. Speak at conferences, reach out to people by email, partnerships. You can do ads or work with influencers or become an influencer yourself. The moment you know that you found a problem we're solving and you have a solution, at the same time, you need to start building the audience. Now, the third step is focus on finding product market fit. And again, it's really difficult for AI engineers because it's so easy to get distracted with cool technology, cool new stuff that's constantly being invented in this amazing field. But product market fit is the most important thing if you want to succeed at starting an AI startup. So what is product market fit? It's not about paying customers. It's not about profitability. It's not about raising lots of money, Series A, B, or C. In reality, it's about having a product that solves a real customer need at a price that's fair, and customers are beating your door to buy that product. In other way, these three components, you need to find this perfect relationships between them. I'll explain you how it feels when you don't have a product market fit. This is when everything feels hard, especially finding customers. And it's like pushing a boulder up the hill. This is what it feels like. Once you reach it, it's a bit like a boulder is rolling down the hill. You are inside that bowl and you're trying to assemble things quick, bits and pieces quickly, catch your breath. Basically, I realized it's like zorbing, which is a fun activity we do here on weekends in New Zealand, which is the picture on the right. So as an AI engineer, you basically always have to ask yourself, what's in it for the customer? Will it help us find product market fit? So when I was preparing this presentation, I shared it with an AI engineer at Thematic, Rob Dumbleton, and I was worried that now he will start a startup. But he said, you know what? You need to add a slide on why you shouldn't start a startup. So here's the slide. You can see the little poop emoji on a plate. Well, basically, being a founder is really, really hard. And another founder once told me that it's a bit like somebody's bringing your shit on a plate every single day and you have to eat it. This is just a selection of all of the tough things that I had to have to deal with. The number one is hearing no from customers, from investors, from employees. You're basically hearing your baby is ugly a million times over and over, and you really have to have thick skin and have your feet on the ground. The selling is basically hearing no over and over. When your customers leave, not because because of mistakes you've made, it's painful. But it's even more painful when some of your best employees move on to other things. It's heartbreaking. The other thing is that you are, as a founder, always have to maintain the morale for the rest of the company. So no matter what's happening and all of the ups and downs, you have to be the upbeat one, the happy one, the encouraging one. So even as I was writing these, I felt very lonely. So this is your counter argument if you might be on the fence. So ultimately, I want to share just a few words about how all of this advice translated into Thematic's journey. So when we started, the problem that we were solving is helping companies understand what's really driving customer loyalty. And customer loyalty has been measured using this metric called NPS. And we basically tied the feedback to this metric and created visuals that understand what's impacting NPS. And we still do that, and there's still lots of value in that. Our solution used unsupervised or self or semi-supervised discovery of themes in customer feedback, and a visualization platform similar like to Tableau, but for unstructured data. And we were building our audience straight away by writing content and also going to lots of customer experience conference where these people hang out. And very quickly, we started getting traction. But then what started happening is that NPS really is not as in fashion anymore, especially now. And also because of COVID, we couldn't travel to conferences anymore. And in general, we realized that penetrating this market is very, very difficult. There are a lot of solutions and a lot of players, and we decided that we needed to pivot. So today we still analyze feedback, but our main proposition is to help product teams prioritize their roadmap by helping them understand all of the qualitative feedback that comes through chat, support tickets, all of the different feedback channels. And the types of solution that we develop also had to change. So now we have to do chat analytics, which is different from survey analytics. Or we need a special theme summarization that doesn't aggregate what's happening in the feedback as much, but is more specific and more precise, which is important for product managers. And of course, travel isn't really possible, although it's opening up again. So we also needed to adjust our approach to building an audience. So as you can see, finding product market fit is not a done and dusted. You are continuously trying to evolve your company, your approach. So if you start an AI startup, you will never run out of opportunities to learn. In conclusion, if you're considering doing it, consider all of the options, but do it. It's easier than ever to start today. And you will learn so much, even though it will be tough. The 3 things that I'd like you to remember is find a problem that feels like hair on fire type of problem where people are using a brick. Don't forget to build your audience from day one, no matter how. Choose your approach, become an influencer on Twitter, write really good quality content on Medium, whatever that is. Find your thing and continuously focus on finding product market fit. And if you do that, your impact will be significant. Well, I hope it was useful, and I will jump over to spatial chat to answer any questions. But thanks for having me.
Alyona, before you go there is a question from the audience. What is worse, what is better? Customers paying for your product and not using it, or customers using your product and not paying for it?
What a great question. I think it's worse when they pay for your product but don't use it. If they use it but don't pay for it, you can try all the different things to kind of gauge that what will make them pay, how much. And if they don't, then there might be other ways to monetize the solution, right? People don't use for Twitter, but they're still making money. Whereas the other situation where they pay but not use it, you basically have a product that you sold, somebody bought because your pitch was great. They've considered using it, but they don't. So the need isn't there. So you aren't actually solving a real problem.
Got it. Got it. I agree. I agree. And one more question for me. So I know you made several moves. You really kind of happened to be there in the middle of this global pandemic, and obviously you moved back to New Zealand, which has its own story, right? Like a fortress against COVID. So I just wonder if you have any insights. Obviously, you have been, you've been a remote company, then like you moved to Silicon Valley to be kind of a regular, probably, centrally located company, and then you were kind of forced by the circumstances to again disperse. So any lessons from this, any observations, how you guys survived it, what made it easy, what made it better? And again, of course, people used to think that they need to come to Silicon Valley and do this, and you kind of, follow this to an extent, but now you kind of do it from around the world. Any observations?
I think there are two elements to this. One is the company and how your team works. And the second one is access to customers. Especially when you're early on, having people you can talk to in terms of, customers, getting feedback from, working closely is really important. So for us, being in Silicon Valley, where there are a lot of customers, a lot of potential customers, and being in the US and being able to travel to all of these conferences throughout the US was important. And we weren't planning to go back to New Zealand anytime soon. And I'm actually traveling to US next month because I still feel like it's very important to kind of be in the US now that we have that, and contact with customers is really critical. But in terms of the team, it's more important that you meet them at some point. We were lucky to build some relationship when we had an actual physical office in San Francisco. We also did team retreats where everybody from the team would meet for a week. We met up in Hawaii, so half of the team from New Zealand flew and the US team flew to Hawaii. So that was amazing to kind of build those relationships, and then it's easy to work remotely. We can't do it now as easily. So we connect in other ways. So for example, we have Friday sessions where each person is running it, and it's not about work, it's about something fun. We had a tarot reading yesterday in one of the sessions. And we also celebrate by basically, once we hit our goals, we give people time off. And so everybody celebrates in their own way, but then shares on Slack how they celebrate. So it's very difficult to connect on a personal level as a remote team. So that's the most important learning, I would say.